Captain America, the man out of time, the first Avenger, the star-spangled man with a plan. The Steve Rogers that we know from the Marvel Cinematic Universe has gone through over a decade of character growth and is my personal favorite character in the MCU as a whole. But the character of Cap has recently been compromised to a concerning degree, and I'm ready to talk about it. This is the deconstruction of Captain America. To properly analyze the downfall of modern-day Steve Rogers, we must go back to the beginning, before the dawn of Captain America. Steve Rogers was a nobody, a frail, sick young man from Brooklyn with a strong moral compass, a man whose dream was to join the military, not for the glory of the fight, but to do the right thing. To put it in his words,
I don't want to kill anyone. I don't like bullies. I don't care where they're from.
I don't care where they're from. This sentence began as a Steve Rogers quote, not Captain America. And this can be seen through all MCU projects featuring Cap, whether it's standing up to an obnoxious jerk in a back alley, to being the last man standing against Thanos and his bloodthirsty army. Steve doesn't back down. He is David facing Goliath. No matter how many times he gets knocked down, he will always get back up and finish the fight. Many of the criticisms aimed at MCU Cap involve his arrogance and overconfidence, while drawing upon the times where he was outwitted by his peers and the blind loyalty he displays towards the ones close to him. I would argue that these actions by Rogers instead fortify his character in a world filled with lines between good and evil becoming increasingly blurred. Take Civil War, for example, with the Sokovia Accords presenting an argument for all superhumans to submit to government authority. Cap is forced to choose a side. While Tony Stark believes that they deserve accountability for their actions, most of this is due to his personal trauma as a man with a broken conscience. Not to even mention that when the Sokovia Accords are put into place, Tony is more than willing to break those rules if he deems it convenient for him. Steve, on the other hand, recognized the flaws within total government control and came to the conclusion that we must take ownership for ourselves and not let others dictate our calling. Casualties are unfortunately involved with conflict, but without the Avengers protecting the Earth, what would become of society as we know it? Steve Rogers is not a perfect man. In fact, none of us are. But through all three of his movies, plus his appearances in other Avengers projects, we can see his commitment to doing the right thing, come what may. Few in the MCU can say they have as developed of a character arc as Steve Rogers. The commitment to positive progression of the character led to the pinnacle of MCU payoffs in Avengers Endgame, where Cap reveals he is worthy to wield Mjolnir, thus receiving the powers of Thor. The conclusion of Steve's arc is ironically an act of selfishness if you really think about it on his part, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing. After returning the Infinity Stones to their original locations, Rogers chooses to return to his first and only true love, Peggy Carter, to live out his days experiencing the love he left behind in the ice. Finally, he can rest. The mission is done. He can have that first dance with his best girl. But what becomes of the shield? The world still needs a Captain America. And this, my friends, begins the fall of Steve Rogers as a character. Just to make sure I am perfectly clear, the passing of the torch from Steve to Sam Wilson is a move that I fully support. To those who would argue that Bucky should have been given the shield, I would like to remind you that the title of Captain America is more than just who can punch better. Bucky still has a lot of psychological trauma and a dark past that he needs to overcome, while Sam has proven time and time again that he is a man of noble character, with the majority of his positive development coming from Captain America: The Winter Soldier, which is one of the top 3 MCU movies of all time in my opinion. Don't at me. The undoing of Steve's character in the Falcon and Winter Soldier TV series can be summed up with a primary question asked in the show. Can or should a black man carry the shield and become Captain America? Which I can say is definitely a probing question to ask, and when done right can build upon themes established in previous movies. The problem lies with the accusation that Steve Rogers was complicit in racism by handing the shield to Sam ignorantly. The show even went so far as to imply how incredibly offensive it would be for Steve to pass the torch to Sam without considering the weight of the world's acceptance of Sam becoming Captain America due to the color of his skin. The problem with this message is it directly flies in the face of everything Steve Rogers stands for. Remember, this is the same man who stood against an entire government multiple times because he would not tolerate oppression from any group of people. The same man who saw the best in anyone, regardless of their status. He has proven he would lay his life down if it was the last chip to play. Steve built a relationship with Sam and spent years fighting by his side, whether it was in the Avengers or on the run from the government. Honestly, I would think that after all that time together, it would have confirmed Sam's character in the eyes of Steve. And even when he went back in time to live with Peggy, he spent decades where he could have changed his decision. But no, he still chose Sam. This wasn't some ignorant, ill-informed decision from a man out of touch with modern society. This was a man who passed the torch of being not just a superhero, but a symbol. And it's because he trusted Sam to do the right thing. I have many problems with the character arcs and decisions in Falcon and Winter Soldier, but the portrayal of Steve's character is one of the most egregious. I won't spend too much time on this next example, but it still warrants mentioning. In the first episode of She-Hulk, we spend several segments hearing ongoing commentary between Bruce Banner and Jen Walters about whether or not Steve died a virgin.
Obviously, Captain America wasn't virgin.
Yes, this show is designed to be a comedy, poking fun at parts of the MCU along the way, but Jen's excessive jokes about Steve's sexual past became frustrating. At least for me. Maybe I'm just a prude who can't take a joke, I don't know. But it feels like a cheap and lazy gag, taking the character of Steve, who is indeed a very straightforward, good-natured, and honest person, and pushing to know unwarranted details of his sexual past.
Captain America!
Again, this is indeed meant to be a comedy, but I'm not laughing. All I'm saying is that if the roles were reversed and we were questioning Captain Marvel's sexual history, the internet would be ablaze, but not in a good way. Personally, I just don't think those type of jokes are very funny. It doesn't matter if they're directed toward male or females. Comedy is indeed subjective, I know that. This is merely my perspective. Now, in summary, I believe that the character of Steve Rogers is indeed under fire. Whether it's questioning his deepest convictions or his sexual history, I feel as though his legacy post-Endgame has lost its weight and importance. This does not change the fact that Captain America is my favorite MCU character, and I believe that he is an inspiration and beacon of hope for all. I want to close this video on my favorite Steve Rogers quote of all time, specifically from The Amazing Spider-Man number 537. I know this quote was adjusted and used in Civil War in a different frame of context, but to me, this is what sums up Steve Rogers as a character. But before I do that, I just want to thank you all for watching, commenting, and subscribing. It really means so much to me. Doesn't matter what the press says, doesn't matter what the politicians or the mobs say, doesn't matter if the whole country decides that something wrong is something right. This nation was founded on one principle above all else, the requirement that we stand up for what we believe, no matter the odds or the consequences. When the mob and the press and the whole world tells you to move, your job is to plant yourself like a tree beside the river of truth and tell the world, no, you move.